Welcome back. Welcome back, word students. This is the second lecture second lecture series of the third module, and it's the second lecture, it's the first lecture on chapter 9. Math has never been my strong point, but that's all right because I know a lot about Greek, and that's what we're doing today. We're doing even more Greek. And I think though this is our last lecture without a bunch of talk about mythology. So it's going to be a great lecture. There's a lot of great words in this lecture. But the next lecture has a bunch of mythology, and I think that's where the magic happens, right? But so let's get through this lecture. Let's enjoy this lecture together. And yeah, we'll see what's happening. Okay, so this is our lecture on chapter 9 of our text. And so we're going to start off with what might seem like kind of a waste of time. We did this with Latin. We're going to do it again with Greek. We're going to look at the formation of Greek nouns and Greek verbs. But now that we've been doing this for a little while, I'm hoping it's a little more clear why we're doing this. And it's mainly just so when you see the actual word that the stem is coming from, when you see the actual Greek word, you can kind of identify if it's a noun or if it's a verb, and you can see why we're dropping off the letters that we're dropping off, that it's not an arbitrary system, that there's actually a meaningful reason why the stems are created the way they are. And so, and also, of course, this will be of immense value to you when you start taking Greek in fall of 2025, teaching at 7 p.m. It's going to be great. But so for some of us, this will be more interesting than others, but I think it does have some value. And the good news is that Greek Greek nouns and Greek verbs in general are much simpler that well, kind of than Latin. So we're not going to have to look at different kind of Greek nouns and different kind of Greek verbs. We're going to talk about them today, and then we're going to know basically everything you need to know for that. Greek nouns in particular are much easier than Latin nouns. There's three kinds, and we're going to look at all three of them. So some Greek nouns, often they're considered feminine. That's just their grammatical category. Those Greek nouns end in what's in the eta. You know what an eta is. We talked about it in the last lecture. You'll be able to tell that a Greek noun ends in an eta if you're just looking at the English because the word will end in a long A, an A with a long mark over it. So some examples of these, the Greek word thalassa, which means sea, the Greek word Gaia, which means earth, philosophia, which means obviously philosophy, which we're going to talk about because that's like my whole deal. BA. So if you take Greek with me, BA is the first word you learn in ancient Greek. It means force. It ends in an eta. It's a feminine noun. So to get to the stems of these nouns, which is what we're really focusing here, you just drop off that eta or the long A in English. And that's how we get the stem of these feminine nouns. As we will see, these are all stems in this chapter. Then we have our masculine nouns and our neuter nouns. This is a gross oversimplification, but for this purpose, I think it's fine. So there's a bunch of nouns that either end in what we're going to say is OS or ON, and those nouns tend to be masculine in gender or neuter in gender. And to get the stem of those nouns, you just drop off either the OS or the ON. So anthropos, the word for person, you drop off the OS, you get anthrop, there's your stem. The word ergon, which we have in English, we have in ergonomics, but the stem is when you drop off the ON, you get the erg. That's your stem. Oh, erg. Isn't that a word we use? ERG? Anyhow, that's the stem. Phobos, our word fear. To get to the stem of that, you drop off OS, you get phobe, and ultimately phobia. Kratos, which I feel like floats around in English. We have that kind of all over the place. This is the Greek noun for strength. To get the stem, you drop off the OS. So that's how you get to the stem of these words. So those are the easy ones to kind of remember. And they make up the majority of the nouns we're going to be learning. But there's also this thing in Greek called the third declension. Now, for Greek students, this is the most exciting kind because this is the best words. And the interesting thing about Greek third declension nouns is that you can't look at the first form, what's called the nominative form, and we're going to see it here as the first dictionary entry. You can't use that for anything. It kind of just does its own thing. You always have to look at what's called the genitive form, or as we're going to see in these slides, the second entry, and you drop the OS off of that second form to get the stem. And that leads to some really interesting things. So, for example, if you look at our first word here, honor, On air provides us no information. Like we can't use that for anything. Nobody can. It just provides you with a very particular use of a noun that you would use as the subject of a verb. But the second entry here, notice andros, that's the genitive form, that would mean of a man. That's where we get our stem. We drop the OS off of that ANDR, and that's where we get the stem ANDR, obviously. And that's where we get like androgen, android, all of these words. Gune, gunaikos is another example. Gune, gunaikos means woman. We don't use gune for anything in English, but gunaik, that's where we get, gynecology, gynocracy, this sort of thing. That second form, you drop the OS off, and that's how you get your stem. I think it's very funny. It's very funny to me that our book is including the word helix, which is the Greek word for spiral. I mean, it's fine. It feels like a very limited use. But yes, so helix, the nominative form is helix, the genitive form, the second entry is helikos, and it's from that helic that we get our stem when you drop the OS, or that there's helicopter, right? That's where that comes from. Photos, the Greek word for light. The second dictionary entry is what we use to get the stem. So you drop the OS off of that, you get phot, and hence photo, photography, these sorts of words. Yeah, so we're going to see these, and I think here in particular, I'm glad that we went through this exercise because as we go through all of these words, like if we go back, we're going to see all of a bunch of nouns like this or like this or like this. And for some of them, you'll notice that there's only one word included. It'll only give you anthropos. And for some, it'll give you the two words, honor, andros. And so it explains to you why you're getting that information. So you have a more fuller, you have a more complete understanding of where we're getting those stems. So those are Greek nouns. We're also going to talk about the best thing. Oh no, this isn't it. Sorry, I spoke too soon. There's also Greek adjectives, of course. They are fine. They're wonderful, but they're very simple. So for the most part, Greek adjectives, you'll just get one word that ends in OS. It's a very abbreviated understanding of what the adjective actually is, but it's fine. You'll see the adjective, it'll end in OS, and you just drop off the OS. The other kind of Greek adjective is like impossibly complicated. It's ridiculous. It's like in Greek class, we would spend many weeks on it. So for those, I'll point them out to you. We can talk about them, but really, we'll just deal with those on a case by case basis. Unfortunately for us, those are like the most popular, the most consistently used adjectives. So we're just going to kind of learn them uniquely. But here it is, the Greek verb. If I can impress upon you nothing else in this lecture, it is that the Greek verb is this miracle of grammar. It is the most exciting, wonderful, perfect system you could possibly imagine. It's so fascinating. There's so many elements to it. Like the Greek verb is magic. Like it's proof alone. Even if we didn't have Aristotle and Plato and Homer, if we just had the Greek verb, it'd be proof that the ancient Greeks were just this miracle of human innovation. But we don't get to talk about that very much. What we're going to talk about basically, we're going to acknowledge the fact that though the Greek verb is a miracle of human innovation, it's very complicated and there's many different kinds. But what we need to know for this class is that for the most part, there's two kinds of Greek verbs. Some have infinitive. So remember, a Greek infinitive is, or any verb infinitive is like the one that's not conjugated. So to run is the infinitive of the verb run. To swim is the infinitive of the verb to swim, obviously, to be. Um, so those are the infinitives. We can grossly divide the Greek verb into two kinds of verbs. There's ones whose infinitive ends in EIN, as we're going to see, epsilon iota nu. So that's one kind. And then there's another kind of Greek verb that's infinitive ends in ESTHI, esthai. And so when we see Greek verbs, we're either going to be given them in forms that end in EIN or forms that end in ESTHI. And so what you do to get the stem of those verbs is to drop off whichever ending you see. And when that pops up, I will show them. I will point it out to you so you know. But yeah, and so the reason I included this picture, I believe, is because, of course, a whale is a majestic animal. But here in this picture, you have to assume like the rest of the world is looking at the animals, that the whale's head, like above water. The Greek verb, the majesty of it is like the whole body. Like so, we're just looking at the head. But I want you to know that there's a whole Greek whale body interestingness underneath. And so that's why you should take Greek next year with me or with my wonderful colleague, Professor Joe Smith. All right. So I think that's it in terms of theory. Oh, no. I have completely underestimated the amount of theory we have in this lesson. So the other thing we're going to talk about what are called Greek hybrids. And so the picture here is of a donkey, the most famous animal hybrid of all time. Though, of course, now that I'm saying this, oh yeah, I think the donkey is it's a hybrid of a horse and a mule, right? But like that's what a donkey is. So hybrid words in English are when you have, at least for the purposes of this course, I'm sure there's many other forms of hybrids we could find. But what we're going to focus on is when English words include a Greek word and a Latin word, a combination of a Greek suffix or a Greek prefix with a Latin stem or a Latin suffix and a Latin prefix with a Greek stem. It happens all of the time. For some reason, some people, I think, kind of, very probably very pe people who are probably very fun at parties hate hybrids. They consider it this sort of like grammatical like freak show, but I think it's fine. It doesn't bother me at all. And some of our best words are hybrids. And we're going to be focusing on these as they come up because as we add on all these words, you're just expanding your ability, right? So I want you to feel perfectly comfortable combining Latin words with Greek words in whatever way you want and recognizing that the people have done it since the beginning of time. Well, since the beginning of English is a completely okay thing to do. So for instance, the word television. Television comes from the Greek word tele, which means far off, and Latin visus, which we learned in the last couple of units. So television is sight from far off, seeing from far off. Automobile is the Greek word auto, which we are going to be learning pretty quickly, and the Latin word mobilis. So automobile is self-moving, which is, again, perfectly good word. Neonatal, the Greek word naos, meaning new, which I think we're actually learning in the next chapter. And the natal is the Latin word. You probably clearly remember natalis, Noel, native, all that sort of thing. So neonatal, Greek, Latin hybrid. And then metadata, which I think is still a really, it's still a really important concept. For a while, I worked at a library and I worked in the metadata department. And so it's really interesting too, because the Greek prefix meta can do a million things. I mean, obviously now, of course, I'm thinking of Mark Zuckerberg. It can mean a bunch of different things. But in the phrase metadata, it means about. And then the data is from the Latin word do, meaning given. So, but here it just means data. So it's almost like a hybrid. It's data, the English word data, coming from the Latin data and then with meta in front of it. So it's a great word. It encapsulates all of the power of language. So yeah, so I'm pretty sure that's it. Yep, that's the end of our theory portion. This is probably a pretty short lecture, which good for me for sticking to my limit. But we're going to have a bunch of material coming up in parts 2 and 3. So much, in fact, that I couldn't even cover all of this chapter. So, but it's fine. We're gonna learn everything. It's gonna be great. So come back in part 2, and we will really start digging in to the stems. Oh man, I did something wrong. What did I want to do? Oh, I did stop share instead of stop recording. Okay, I'm going to stop recording and I'll see you in the second lecture.